Between the ages of 4 and 12, I was friends with a boy named Jack. Jack was always a bit of a strange kid, but being my neighbor, he was my first friend in life. Jack and I used to play every day, whether it was football, going to the park, or even playing tag in the street with the other kids in our neighborhood. You name it, we did it. One weekend in the summer, when we were 8 years old, it was a scorching hot day, and 2 of the kids in our street were having a water fight. Having some water guns in our shed, I thought it would be a great idea to fill one up and join in. As the day went on, we were having a great time. A few other kids had joined in with their water guns. That was when Jack came out with one of those insulated flasks that keeps your drink warm all day. He hurled the flask at us. Presumably, he intended to throw the water, but it was full to the brim, and it proved too heavy for him to keep a hold of. The water and flask fell to the pavement. Steam instantly rised, just a few feet from me and one of the other kids. Jack's mom came rushing out of her house and screamed at Jack to get inside. Being only 8, I didn't realize how serious this was. A couple years later, Jack and I went to a local park. When we got to the park, Jack asked me if I wanted to see something cool. He then pulled out a BB gun, a good one at that. Jack said that he got it off of his dad, who said he could shoot cans with it. But when Jack and I went into the forest behind the park, Jack then started firing at random kids who were also playing in the forest. I told him to stop a few times, but he told me to stop being boring and continue with his stupid behavior. I then made my way home, where Jack would follow, shooting me every so often. He hit me in the shins a few times. I told Jack to grow up, and then I told him I didn't want to hang out with him anymore, in school or after school. I continued to see Jack at school, though. He would smile creepily at me and make slices across his throat with his fingers when he saw me. One day, I was in my garden with my cousin, and Jack was in his bedroom. I could see him through the window. He had a tie on, and made a noose gesture with it, and then pointed at me and my cousin, before smiling sinisterly. Jack became very odd, and with our houses being attached, I would hear him hysterically laughing at night, and I would hear bangs on the wall at stupid hours of the night. Shortly after I turned 11, Jack and his family moved away, and life was peaceful. I continued to grow up, and lived out my mid-late teens with great friends. Jack did become a distant memory as I lived out my teens, and moved away to university. I'm now 22, and when I visited my home this past summer, my parents informed me that Jack had been admitted into a mental institution after he attempted to kill his parents. He had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This shocked me, and I didn't quite know what to say, but these events did come flashing back to me when I found out what he did. My dad actually told me that the water fight incident was serious. Jack had attempted to throw boiling hot water at me and my friends that day, and we could have been seriously scalded. So Jack, I hope you're getting the help you need in the institution. I have this neighbor who lives across the street from me. He doesn't live alone. He lives with his parents. For privacy reasons, let's call him Drew. My parents tell me that Drew has issues, and when he's acting crazy, to stay away from him. I had a conversation with him, and he seemed normal when he was on his medication. One time, Drew stabbed his grandfather to death when he was young. He was arrested at first, until his family told them that he had mental issues. The judge ordered Drew to be evaluated at a mental hospital until he was no longer a threat to himself and others. He moved back to his parents' house after that. I forgot to mention that when he was off his medication, he would start to yell or sing at random times. Another time, when I was 14 years old in my room, I heard yelling from across the street, and I looked out my window. It was him. The windows from my room showed his house, so I could see everything. He had a knife and was yelling gibberish to drivers, trying to break in. Drew targeted people who drove on the road. Drivers swerved to get out of the way and drove fast down the road. They were scared. I was frozen in fear and didn't do anything about it except watch it go down. One driver contacted 911. Drew ran inside the house when he heard sirens. He locked himself inside and refused to let anyone in. Police and the SWAT team told me to stay indoors until it was peaceful. The crazy neighbor stayed in his house for 8 hours until he gave himself up to the authorities. He was taken again to the mental hospital and again released back to his parents' house. The mother moved out because she was afraid of him. She found his writing about him wanting to kill her. She divorced her husband after he refused to get him into a mental hospital. He didn't find any writing about him, so that's why. The last time something happened was last year. Drew broke into his next-door neighbor's house, and he waited for them to come home. He had a machete with him. My mother saw him breaking into the house from the window and called the police. He was taken away. His father told my parents that he would be in the mental hospital for life. When my parents asked why, he refused to tell them. My now ex-husband Dave and I were thrilled when we moved into our first home. It was a condo in a new building on the 18th floor. Little did we know that a horrible experience was about to begin. Our neighbor Nick had an eerie vibe about him from the moment we met. His cold gaze seemed to linger for too long. We tried our best to ignore it at first. I can be pretty socially awkward myself, so I get it. We still couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off, though. Nick lived a floor above us and one unit over. We could see him sometimes when we were on our balcony. He would be right above us. We lived there for about 6 months with no real incidents, just some awkward moments in the halls. We often caught glimpses of Nick watching us from his balcony, but nothing too bad. We became increasingly cautious, drawing the blinds and closing our curtains. Dave thought I was being too paranoid, and I thought he had a point at the time. One evening I returned home from work. Dave wasn't home yet. I opened the door and walked in. When I looked down at the floor, there was an envelope slipped under the door. I cautiously picked it up, not thinking much of it at first. It could have been some kind of work notice from the building, although they didn't usually do things like that. I ripped the envelope open. There were several printed photographs. As I examined them, dread washed over me like a tidal wave. The pictures showed Dave and me sound asleep in our bedroom. Intimate moments captured without our knowledge or consent. My hands trembled and a knot formed in the pit of my stomach. The images were full-page size, black and white photographs that seemed to be printed by a computer from the 90s. They weren't great quality, but it was definitely us. Whoever took them was in our room when we were sleeping. Our suspicions turned immediately to Nick, the neighbor who had always weirded us out. He seemed to be the most likely culprit, but without any evidence, we were left feeling vulnerable and powerless. Dave thinks he climbed down from our balcony, Spider-Man style, to break in. I know it sounds far-fetched, but I don't have a better answer. There's no way that somebody came in from the street. We reported it to the building and the police, but everyone was pretty useless. There should have been some way to check who slipped the envelope under the door. There were security cameras in the halls, but building security said they couldn't find anything. I think it was just laziness on their part, but maybe there was some technical issue as well. We installed security cameras and started locking our balcony door, but the feeling of being watched constantly haunted us day and night. We couldn't shake the paranoia that gnawed at our sanity. Never knowing when or where the next invasion would happen, we hardly slept for months. As the weeks went on, our relationship strained under the weight of what was happening. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, or some other issues that I won't get into, but Dave and I separated around that time. He stayed in the condo, and I moved into an apartment. To this day, the true identity of the invader remains a mystery, an unsolved chapter in our lives. I carry the weight of that experience, forever changed by that invasion of my privacy. It was a dark time, and this may be the last time that I ever discuss it. When I was 16, I lived in a quiet cul-de-sac in Northern California. All the neighbors knew each other, and we all got along great. We would often have cookouts together, and we would go swimming at each other's pools, etc. It was a really safe area, and the whole neighborhood was familiar. There was one man, however, who always struck me as a little odd. He lived by himself, tucked away in a house where he raised chickens, and didn't really seem to work. This man, we'll call him Mark, was good friends with my immediate neighbor. He was probably in his late 60s at the time. He wasn't much taller than me. He had a wild gray beard and unkempt gray hair. We were used to seeing him around and having him join in on our festivities. It also wasn't unusual for my mom to send us up the road to buy eggs from him, just when we'd run short and she didn't want to run to the store. Par for the course for our neighborhood, on the 4th of July, we had a big barbecue and invited everyone. Mark joined us, and everyone was enjoying the night. It was warm, the adults were drinking, the kids were playing, and it was just overall a great time. But the whole night, Mark kept trying to talk to me. I would always find him at my hip, trying to draw my attention away from my friends and chat. At one point, he said,
"I would sure love to just go up into the mountains, far away from everyone, and just bring a woman with me, you know?"
Then he said,
"Everyone sucks but you, baby."
And when he said baby, he gestured towards me. I kind of laughed and tried to shrug it off and carry on with the night. I was 16 years old at the time, and still beholden to the be polite no matter the cost mindset, and didn't address it the way I should have. Eventually, everyone packed up and started heading to their houses. I somehow ended up alone outside with Mark. I was getting something out of my car, and he came up close to me. I was essentially pinned against the car. I don't really remember what he was talking to me about, but I was uncomfortable. I just wanted to go inside. I have to go to work in the morning, so I should probably head inside and go to bed, I said, when there was a pause in the conversation.
"Oh no, come on, let's just sit and talk for a little while longer."
I really can't. I have to be going. I have to work tomorrow. But he kept insisting, telling me he just wanted to talk and that he was lonely. At this point, he was closer, and I could smell the beer and barbecue on his breath. I glanced over my shoulder, hoping someone would come outside and I could use them as a distraction or an excuse to leave, but no one was there. The porch light wasn't even on. My parents and siblings were watching TV at the back of the house. "Look," I said, while trying not to sound as panicked as I was starting to feel. "I honestly just need to go to bed. I can't stand talk. I'm sorry."
"Well, alright then. Can I at least get a hug?"
I hesitated. I didn't want to give him a hug, but I had been raised in an environment where hugging was normal, encouraged, and expected, so I agreed. I was thinking that if I at least gave him a hug, then he would be placated and let me leave. He pulled me in close and pulled my hips in. I was so stunned that I just stood there. He started kissing my neck and telling me how badly he wanted me, that he wanted to just run away with me and never come back. That was enough for me to push him away and run inside. I could still smell his breath and the feel of his beard against my neck. I was so scared and so disgusted. This man was 50 years older than me and had just put his hands all over me. My mom could tell immediately that something was wrong, so I told her everything. She called the police right away, and they came over and talked to him. He denied ever touching me at all. He said I was lying for attention. Nevertheless, they told me to stay away from him. The entire neighborhood ousted Mark. No one would speak to him anymore or invite him to anything. Even my next-door neighbor wouldn't include him anymore. I know it's not the scariest encounter, and I'm lucky that everyone believed me and took immediate action on my behalf. I know that it could have been far worse, but I was absolutely terrified. Not many young women are surrounded by such support, and my neighbors showed me that they were truly good people. We ended up moving away a few years later, but I remained good friends with Mark's next-door neighbor and still go to visit her sometimes, 13 or so years later. I'm always worried that I'll see him again, but I never have, and I'm grateful for that. This occurred 3 years ago, when I was in the 6th grade. Summer break just started, and me and my friends were looking to do some ding-dong ditching. We went months earlier during the school year, but that resulted in us getting suspended, and the police were notified. We were desperate to start again, so it wasn't a surprise when my friends contacted me to have a ding-dong ditching session while wearing our Halloween masks. It was the last day of school, and I was up for it because we couldn't get suspended now. We all met up after school with our Spider-Man masks and other weird things we could use to hide our faces. We started instantly. My friend Jose took the first house. He ran up, ignoring the no trespassing sign. He kicked the door, and we all sprinted away laughing. To our dismay, nobody opened the door. Jordan took the second house. He ran up and punched the screen, a loud noise. We ran away laughing again. However, this time a skinny man, around 30 years old, opened the door. He saw us running away and was extremely angry. After seconds of shouting, he slammed the door and went back inside. I chuckled and said we should do his house again, expecting a big reaction. I wanted to look brave, so I ran up, kicked the screen, and ran away. This time, it was as if he was waiting right behind the door. When I was around 10 feet away, it swung open, and the man darted after me. He quickly realized that he couldn't catch a skinny, fast 12-year-old kid, so he jumped into his car and started it. My friends and I were screaming in fear, realizing this crazy man was going to chase us in his car. I was the fastest out of the group, so I had the lead. We all ran down the hill, where 2 of my friends lived. They ran into their houses, leaving 4 of us to keep sprinting, being chased by a lunatic man in a car. I kept running, even though my lungs felt like they were about to burst. I turned a corner and jumped a fence into a random backyard. The rest of my friends joined me. Jordan thought about calling the police, but we talked him out of it, because we would get in trouble for ding-dong ditching anyway. We watched the guy speed past our hiding spot as we breathed sighs of relief. Suddenly he parked his car, as if he was going to be looking around for us, but we hid well, and he hadn't spotted us in the bushes. We could see him talking to some kids who were trying to walk home. After taking one last look around, he eventually drove away in his rusty, beat-up old Honda. Jordan had to walk the path that the man had drove away, so he waited a bit and ran for it. 5 seconds after he ran out, he turned around and screamed. He took a U-turn. The man was parked behind a house waiting to see if we would come out, and Jordan fell for it. He screamed and ran away at a full sprint, and the man chased him in his car. I thought I was going to die. As if summoned by God, we noticed a police car parked 50 feet away in front of us. We bolted towards it, shouting for help. The man floored it after he saw the car. We told the cop a fake story about how the man was chasing us in his car, and we were trying to walk home. Sadly, none of us thought to get the license plate,